I thought I knew my wife. We'd been married for 2 years, living what I believed was the perfect arrangement, until the day she looked me dead in the eye and said 4 words that would destroy everything. We need to talk. What happened next turned my world upside down. But by the time it was over, she would learn that some lessons cost more than you're willing to pay. My name is Jason Bennett, and I'm the kind of guy who fixes problems for a living. 32 years old, logistics coordinator for a mid-sized shipping company, the type who doesn't complain when the day stretches to 12 hours, because that's what it takes to keep everything running smooth. I solve puzzles, routing trucks, managing schedules, making sure cargo gets where it needs to go when it needs to be there. I thought I had my personal life figured out the same way. Ashley and I met 4 years ago at my buddy Mike's game night. She was laughing at some terrible zombie movie we'd thrown on as background noise, making jokes that actually landed instead of the forced humor most people try. Dark hair, bright smile, the kind of woman who could make fun of herself without being self-deprecating. We bonded over our shared appreciation for movies so bad they circle back to entertaining. And she had this way of finding the absurd in everything that made even mundane conversations feel lighter. We dated for 2 years before getting married in a small backyard ceremony. Nothing fancy, just family and close friends watching us promise to build something together. That was 2 years ago, and for the past year and a half since our wedding, we'd settled into what I thought was the perfect arrangement. The arrangement we lived by wasn't forced or negotiated like some business deal. 3 weeks after our honeymoon, Ashley brought it up herself over breakfast. She was working part-time retail then, coming home frustrated with management that treated employees like expendable parts, dealing with customers who seemed to take personal offense at store policies she had no control over. "What if I just didn't do this anymore?" she asked, stirring her coffee absently. I looked up from my cereal. "Do what?" "The job, I mean. What if I focused on making this place actually feel like a home instead of just somewhere we sleep between work shifts?" she explained. I looked around our kitchen, still half-unpacked boxes, mismatched furniture we'd combined from our separate apartments, the general chaos of 2 people who work too much to properly settle anywhere. "You want to stay home?" I asked. "I want to create something here," she replied, and there was genuine excitement in her voice. "Cook real meals instead of microwaving whatever's fastest. Actually organize our space so it feels intentional. Be here when you come home instead of both of us collapsing into bed too tired to have a real conversation." It made sense. My salary could cover our modest expenses, and honestly, the idea of coming home to someone who wasn't as drained as I was felt like luxury I didn't know I wanted until she offered it. For a year and a half, it worked beautifully. I'd walk through the door around 7:30 most nights to the smell of actual dinner cooking. Not elaborate gourmet stuff, but real food made with care. My work clothes would appear clean in my closet without me thinking about it. The house developed a personality that was distinctly ours. Her plants thriving in every window, my books organized on shelves she'd painted, photos from weekend trips arranged on walls that actually had art instead of bare nails and good intentions. Our rhythm became comfortable in the best way. Friday nights were movies on the couch, her head on my shoulder while we debated whether the protagonist in whatever thriller we'd picked was making smart choices or just lucky ones. Saturday mornings meant farmers' market runs where she'd chat with vendors like old friends, while I carried bags of vegetables I'd never heard of, but somehow ended up loving when she turned them into dinner. We had inside jokes that would make us crack up in public while other people looked confused, and conversations that could stretch for hours without either of us checking our phones. The house was mine before we married. A small 2-bedroom. I'd bought with every dollar of savings I had, plus a mortgage that scared me awake some nights. But after Ashley moved in, it became ours in every way that mattered. She made it warmer somehow, more lived in and intentional. I thought we were building exactly what we'd promised each other at that backyard wedding. Looking back, I can pinpoint when things started shifting. About 2 months ago, small changes that felt like temporary mood adjustments rather than warning signs. Ashley spending more time scrolling through her phone, this distracted quality to her attention even during conversations. Dinner started coming later, sometimes not at all. When I'd ask if everything was okay, she'd brush me off. "I'm fine," she'd say, or "just thinking about stuff." in a tone that didn't invite follow-up questions. I chalked it up to restlessness, maybe seasonal depression, the kind of temporary funk everyone goes through. We'd been together long enough that I figured whatever was bothering her would work itself out, or she'd tell me when she was ready. I had no idea she was quietly building a case against everything we'd created together. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in October. I'd worked a 14-hour day dealing with a shipment crisis that required constant phone calls and emergency rerouting. The kind of day where you skip lunch because there's no time, and by evening your head pounds from caffeine and stress. I dragged myself through our front door, every muscle aching, already imagining the relief of sitting down to a real meal and maybe watching something mindless on TV. "Hey, babe," I called out, dropping my keys on the kitchen counter. "What's for dinner?" The silence that followed felt different than usual. Heavier, deliberate. Ashley's voice drifted from the living room, flat and cold. "Nothing. We need to talk." I didn't know it then, but those 4 words, "we need to talk," were about to destroy everything I thought we'd built together. I walked into the living room expecting maybe a conversation about money, or her wanting to discuss starting a family, or planning our next vacation. Ashley was sitting on the couch, phone in her lap, looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not angry exactly, but distant in a way that made my stomach clench. "Sit down," she said, and something in her tone made me choose the chair across from her instead of my usual spot beside her on the couch. What came next? Felt like being ambushed by a stranger wearing my wife's face. "I've been doing a lot of reading lately," Ashley began, her voice taking on this rehearsed quality like she'd practiced this speech, about patriarchal structures and how women are conditioned to accept exploitation in marriage, about unpaid domestic labor and how society convinces us it's our natural role when it's really just a way to keep women economically dependent. I stared at her, trying to process words that sounded like they'd been copied from some feminist textbook. This wasn't how Ashley talked. She was practical, straightforward, funny, not someone who spoke in academic theories. "I realize now that what we have isn't a partnership," she continued, gaining momentum. "It's me serving as your unpaid domestic servant while you get all the benefits of a traditional marriage without acknowledging the inequality. I cook your meals, clean your house, do your laundry, manage your domestic life so you can focus entirely on your career advancement." "Ashley, what are you talking about?" I interrupted, genuinely confused. "This was your idea. You wanted to stay home." "We agreed. I was conditioned to want that." She cut me off, and now there was heat in her voice. I internalized societal expectations about women's roles and convinced myself I chose it freely. But I see now how manipulative this whole arrangement is, how it benefits you while leaving me with no financial independence, no career development, no identity outside of being your support system. I felt like I was talking to someone who'd been replaced by a pod person. "You're not my support system, you're my partner," I replied. "And you do have financial independence. We share everything. The bank accounts, the house, all of it." Ashley laughed, but it wasn't her laugh. It was bitter, condescending. "Sharing resources you control isn't the same as independence, Jason," she retorted. "And I'm done pretending otherwise." She stood up, smoothing down her shirt like she was preparing for a business meeting. "From now on, I'm not cooking your meals, cleaning up after you, or managing household tasks that benefit you," she announced. "Those aren't my jobs just because I'm a woman. You're a grown man. You can take care of yourself." The exhaustion from my 14-hour day crashed over me like a wave. I was too tired to fight, too confused to form coherent arguments against whatever transformation had happened to my wife over the past 2 months. "What are you going to do all day?" I asked. Her smile was the most chilling part. "Whatever I want," she replied. "It's my life." I made myself a sandwich in a kitchen that suddenly felt hostile, eating alone while Ashley returned to her phone, already mentally disconnected from my existence. Over the next 2 weeks, my life became a grinding cycle of survival. Wake at 5 a.m., work 12 hours, come home to cook my own dinner, do my own laundry, clean up after myself while Ashley lounged on the couch, living her liberated life. She'd gotten a haircut, something edgy and asymmetrical that looked nothing like her. Started wearing clothes I'd never seen before, ordering packages that arrived daily. When I asked how she was paying for things, she reminded me sweetly that we shared resources, remember? The real gut punch came when I discovered her TikTok account. I was stirring pasta at 9 p.m. after another brutal day. Phone propped on the counter, playing random videos to fill the silence, when her face appeared on my screen. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Then I realized she was recording these videos in our house, often with me visible in the background. Day 12 of not being my husband's maid, she announced to the camera, panning to show me at the stove, shoulders slumped with exhaustion, teaching him that I'm not his personal servant. Watch how he has to actually take care of himself like the adult he is. The comments were a parade of celebration. Yas, queen. He should be grateful you put up with that for so long. You don't owe him anything. This is what a strong woman looks like. I scrolled through her profile with growing horror. Video after video of her documenting my exhaustion, my confusion, my attempts to maintain our household while working full-time. She'd turned our private crisis into public entertainment, painting herself as some brave revolutionary, and me as an oppressive patriarch who'd somehow forced her into domestic servitude. There was one video titled, "His Face When I Told Him I'm Not His Bangmaid Anymore," where she'd secretly filmed my reaction to finding dirty dishes piled in the sink, after I'd specifically asked if she could handle them while I worked late. The me on screen looked defeated, frustrated, completely unaware I was being recorded for the amusement of strangers. The comments on that one were particularly vicious. Look at him sulking because his free labor dried up. Men are so pathetic when they actually have to adult. I bet he's never done a dish in his life. I watched myself in these videos, exhausted, confused, trying to hold together a life that was actively being dismantled for social media content, and something inside me broke. Not with a dramatic snap, but with a quiet, cold certainty that settled in my chest like ice. I didn't confront her. I didn't argue or plead or try to reason with whatever online community had brainwashed my wife. Instead, I started making mental notes. Financial accounts, house ownership documents, marriage date, her complete lack of employment history for the past year and a half. I began calculating, not emotionally, but logically, the way I solve problems at work. 2 weeks after Ashley's declaration of independence, I came home from work, walked past my wife editing her latest TikTok video about breaking free from domestic slavery, and went straight to my bedroom. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a manila envelope I'd been preparing in secret. She thought she was teaching me a lesson about independence. She had no idea I was about to teach her what independence actually costs. I changed into comfortable clothes, manila envelope in hand, and walked back into the living room where Ashley was giggling at comments on her latest video. She was sprawled across the couch like she owned the place, which, legally speaking, she didn't. I stepped directly in front of the TV, blocking her view. "Jason, move," she said without looking up from her phone. "I'm trying to respond to my followers." "Your followers can wait," I replied. I dropped the envelope in her lap. "Consider this a gift for all your hard work on social media." Ashley glanced at the envelope with mild curiosity, probably expecting concert tickets or some romantic gesture to win her back. When she opened it and saw the divorce papers, her face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally panic in the span of about 10 seconds. "What is this?" she whispered, though we both knew exactly what it was. "Your independence," I answered, settling into the chair across from her with the calm of someone who'd spent weeks planning this moment. "You're a strong, independent feminist who doesn't need a man to take care of you, right? So you don't need me." Ashley's hands were shaking as she flipped through the legal documents. "Jason, this is insane," she said. "You can't be serious. We can work this out." "Work what out?" I asked. "You've made it crystal clear that our marriage is an oppressive patriarchal arrangement. I'm just helping you escape it." "I was going through a phase," she replied quickly, her voice taking on a desperate edge. "I was influenced by some toxic online communities, but I see that now. I'll delete the videos, I'll cook dinner tonight, we can go back to how things were." "No," I interrupted. "We can't. Because you've shown me exactly how you really feel about everything we built together. How you see me, how you see our life. And honestly, Ashley, I don't want to go back to being married to someone who thinks I'm her oppressor." That's when I revealed the extent of my preparation. "I froze your credit cards this morning," I said conversationally, like I was discussing the weather. "Closed our joint checking account too. The savings account is now solely in my name, which is legal since all the funds came from my income anyway." Ashley's face went white. "You can't do that," she protested. "I'll call the bank." "Go ahead," I replied. "They'll tell you the same thing my lawyer already confirmed. Since you haven't contributed financially to this household in the past year and a half, you have no legal claim to assets accumulated during that time." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. I also had an interesting conversation with a real estate attorney. "This house, I bought it 2 years before we got married. It's entirely in my name. No community property laws apply." Ashley stared at the phone like it was showing her footage of her own funeral. "But I live here," she said weakly. "This is my home." "Not anymore, it isn't," I answered. While she processed that information, I walked to our bedroom and started packing her clothes into the suitcase she'd used for our honeymoon. I wasn't careful about it, just throwing things in without concern for organization or wrinkles. She followed me, grabbing my arm. "Jason, please," she pleaded. "You're angry, I understand that, but we can fix this. I made mistakes, but divorce is extreme. I have nowhere to go." I shrugged off her touch and continued packing. "Call your feminist friends," I suggested. "I'm sure all those women celebrating your independence in the comments will be happy to support you now." "Isn't that what sisterhood is for?" Ashley started crying then, real tears, not the performative emotion she'd been showcasing online. "I don't have any real friends from those groups," she admitted. "They're just random people on the internet. And my family, you know how they feel about divorce." "That's not my problem anymore," I stated. I zipped up the suitcase and carried it to the front door, Ashley trailing behind me like a lost child. When I opened the door, the evening air rushed in, carrying the scent of approaching autumn. "I can't survive on my own," she whispered. "I don't have a job, I don't have savings, I haven't worked in over a year. My resume is basically empty." "Then you better figure it out fast," I replied, setting her suitcase on the porch. "You wanted independence. This is what it looks like." Ashley stood in the doorway, mascara running down her cheeks, trying one last desperate appeal. "What about love?" she asked. "What about the years we've been together? Doesn't any of that matter?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I was seeing a stranger. The woman I'd married would never have turned our private struggles into public entertainment. She would never have dismissed our partnership as exploitation. She would never have spent weeks systematically destroying our life together while recording it for applause from strangers. "You killed whatever love I had left when you decided to humiliate me online for followers," I told her. "When you turned our marriage into content. When you convinced yourself that being taken care of was the same as being oppressed." I stepped back and started closing the door. "Jason, wait," she called out. The door closed with a soft click. I turned the deadbolt and stood there for a moment, listening to her sobs through the wood. Then I walked to my kitchen, poured myself 3 fingers of the good whiskey we'd been saving for our anniversary, and sat on my couch. I raised the glass toward the closed door. Cheers to independence. The legal proceedings moved faster than Ashley could have imagined. Her court-appointed attorney reviewed the case and delivered the hard truth. The house belonged to me. She'd contributed nothing financially to our marriage. Her employment gap made any claim of lost earning potential laughable. The best she could hope for was a minimal settlement to avoid prolonged court, costs that would eat up anything she might gain. Ashley walked away from our 2-year marriage with $3,000 and a harsh education in what independence actually costs. She moved into a cramped apartment with Craigslist roommates, took a job waiting tables for minimum wage plus tips that depended on her ability to smile at customers who treated her like she was invisible. Her TikTok account went silent. The feminist groups that had celebrated her bravery moved on to new faces, new causes. Nobody asked about her anymore. The comments on her old videos turned vicious as the internet moved on to its next entertainment. "Where's your independence now?" Actions have consequences. Hope it was worth destroying your marriage for likes. I didn't feel victorious watching her struggle. I felt empty, tired, but also relieved, like finally removing a splinter that had been embedded under my skin for months. I thought divorce would be the end of the story. Turns out it was just the beginning of figuring out who I was without the weight of someone else's expectations. 1 month after the divorce papers were signed, I did something that surprised even myself. I walked into the county animal shelter and adopted a golden retriever named Max. It was completely impulsive, maybe even reckless given my work schedule, but something about his enthusiastic, tail wagging, and unconditional excitement spoke to a part of me I'd forgotten. Existed. Uncomplicated joy. Max didn't care about my work hours or my failed marriage or whether I knew how to cook anything besides pasta and sandwiches. He was just happy I showed up. Coming home transformed overnight from a dreaded return to an empty house into something I actually looked forward to. Max would be waiting by the door, entire body wiggling with excitement. Like my arrival was the best thing that had happened to him all day. I started experimenting with cooking, not out of grim necessity like those final weeks with Ashley, but out of genuine curiosity. Without the resentment and exhaustion poisoning every meal, I discovered I actually enjoyed trying new recipes. Sometimes I succeeded spectacularly, sometimes I burned things and ordered pizza, but Max didn't judge either way. He was just happy to be included in whatever was happening. Our routine developed naturally. Morning walks before work, where Max would investigate every tree and fire hydrant like he was conducting important research. Evening strolls through the neighborhood, where I started actually talking to my neighbors instead of rushing inside to avoid awkward small talk. Weekends at the dog park, where Max made friends with other dogs, while I found myself in conversations with their owners about normal, pleasant things, weekend plans, local restaurants, anything except relationship drama. 3 months after the divorce, I got a call from my supervisor about a promotion opportunity I'd never seriously considered before. Department manager, significant pay increase, better hours, less travel. The kind of position I couldn't have pursued when I needed every hour of overtime pay to maintain Ashley's comfortable lifestyle. Now, with just myself and Max to support, I could actually prioritize quality of life over raw income. The interview went well. I got the job. With my new schedule, I had time to reconnect with friends I'd gradually lost touch with during my marriage. Mike invited me to restart our old poker nights. Dave asked if I wanted to join his weekend hiking group. Simple social connections that didn't require navigating Ashley's moods or preferences or schedule. I hosted my first dinner party 6 months post-divorce. Nothing fancy, just grilling burgers in the backyard for a handful of friends. But sitting around my patio table, listening to easy conversation and genuine laughter, watching Max charm everyone by successfully begging burger scraps from each guest in turn, I realized how isolated I'd become. How much of my social life had revolved around what Ashley wanted to do, where she felt comfortable, which friends she approved of. The house became genuinely mine for the first time. I painted the spare bedroom the dark blue I'd always wanted. Set up a proper home office in the space that used to be cluttered with Ashley's craft supplies, projects she'd start enthusiastically and abandon half-finished. I bought furniture I actually liked instead of compromising on pieces that matched Ashley's Pinterest boards. The place felt peaceful in a way it never had before. I wasn't lonely. I was content. There's a difference I'd never understood until I experienced it. Meanwhile, Ashley's life told a different story. I didn't seek out information about her. But mutual acquaintances talk, and word filters through whether you want it or not. Still waitressing, still living paycheck to paycheck, working doubles just to cover her share of rent in that cramped apartment. Her social media presence had vanished entirely. The videos that once proclaimed her independence had been deleted. But screenshots live forever, circulated by people who love watching hubris collapse in real time. I received occasional texts from unknown numbers. Ashley using borrowed phones, trying different emotional angles to worm her way back into my life. Apologetic messages claiming she'd been temporarily influenced by toxic online communities. Desperate appeals about how she'd learned her lesson and just wanted to come home. Manipulative. Attempts to guilt me about her struggling. Financially, I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't block them either. There was something almost anthropological about observing the predictable patterns of her attempts to undo the consequences of her choices. One evening, I was sitting on my back porch with Max stretched out beside me, cold beer sweating in the evening heat, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. My phone buzzed with another message from another unknown number. The text read, "I made a mistake. Please, can we just talk?" I read it, considered it for about 3 seconds, then deleted the contact without responding. I scratched Max's ears and asked him, "What do you think, boy? Should I respond?" Max yawned and rolled onto his back, belly exposed to catch the last rays of sunlight. "Yeah," I laughed. "That's what I thought." I realized then that the revenge wasn't really the divorce or the financial consequences Ashley faced. The revenge was building a life so fulfilling that she became irrelevant to my happiness, a footnote in my story rather than the main character. 6 months ago, I thought I needed someone to make my life complete. Turns out I just needed to stop carrying someone who was making it incomplete. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I'm sitting in my home office, a space that used to be cluttered with Ashley's abandoned craft supplies, now organized as a genuine workspace where I actually get things done. I work from home 3 days a week now, thanks to the promotion, with Max sleeping under my desk and afternoon sunlight, streaming through windows that stay open because no one's constantly worried about drafts or privacy from neighbors. I've learned things about myself I never had the space to discover before. I'm more capable than I gave myself credit for. Cooking isn't a chore when you're not exhausted and resentful. It's actually creative and satisfying. Cleaning my own space feels meditative when it's genuinely my space, organized the way I like it, decorated with things that make me happy instead of things that photograph well for social media. I've discovered I like early morning jogs before the neighborhood wakes up, that I'm surprisingly good at woodworking. My latest project is a custom dog bed for Max that's better built than anything I could buy, that I prefer quiet evenings with a book to constant background television noise, that I actually enjoy hosting people when it's my choice, my guest list, my timeline. My social life has expanded naturally. Mrs. Murphy next door and I actually talk now when we're both checking our mail. She brings me tomatoes from her garden and I help her move heavy packages. Steve from the dog park might become a real friend, or he might just stay someone I enjoy talking to on Sunday mornings. Either way is fine. There's no pressure, no strategic social planning, no analyzing whether potential friendships serve some larger purpose. There's also Sarah, who volunteers at the animal shelter where I adopted Max. She laughs at my terrible jokes, knows more about dogs than anyone should, and has absolutely no interest in performing her personality for strangers online. We've had coffee a few times. Maybe it'll develop into something, maybe it won't. I'm not desperate to fill a void anymore, so I can just enjoy her company without needing it to be anything more than what it is. I think about Ashley occasionally, but only in abstract terms, wondering if she ever grasped the irony of her situation, if she understands what she actually threw away. A mutual friend mentioned seeing her at the grocery store recently, looking exhausted, buying ramen and discount coffee. The friend seemed to expect me to gloat or express concern. I felt neither. Ashley made her choices, and consequences aren't punishment. They're just cause and effect playing out exactly as logic would predict. I hosted another barbecue last weekend. Bigger this time. More people. The kind of easy gathering that happens when you're not walking on eggshells around someone's mood or agenda. Max appointed himself official greeter, charming everyone by systematically working the crowd for burger scraps. Genuine laughter echoed through the backyard until well after sunset. As people left with promises to do it again soon, I cleaned up my yard and realized I hadn't thought about my ex-wife once during the entire evening. That's when I knew I'd truly moved on. Not because I'd stopped caring if she was okay, but because I'd stopped measuring my happiness against her misery. Ashley's final attempt to contact me came 2 weeks ago, a handwritten letter forwarded through my lawyer, 3 pages of explanations about toxic online influences and terrible mistakes and how she finally understands what she lost. I read it once, felt a flicker of something that might have been recognition of shared human fallibility, then filed it with the divorce papers. There was nothing left to say. We'd both made our choices, and now we were living with them. Tonight I'm on my back porch again with Max resting his head on my lap, both of us watching another sunset. There's a cold beer sweating condensation in the evening heat. A novel I'm halfway through sitting on the side table and absolutely nowhere I need to be. Complete peace. I raise my beer toward the sunset, Max's tail thumping against the porch boards in sleepy contentment. To independence, I say quietly, the real kind. Not the performative rebellion Ashley embraced. Not the defiance against imaginary oppression, but the genuine self-sufficiency that comes from knowing you're complete on your own. The freedom Ashley was searching for in all the wrong places. The freedom I found only after she left. Max barks softly as if agreeing. I laugh, scratch behind his ears, and take a long drink. Tomorrow I'll wake up and go for a run. Maybe start that new bookshelf project. Or call my brother I've been meaning to catch up with. Or just spend the day doing absolutely nothing productive. The choice is mine. That's the point. That's the freedom Ashley was looking for in all the wrong places. The freedom I discovered only when she was no longer part of the equation. I don't wish her well. I don't wish her anything at all. She's simply not part of my calculations anymore. And that, I realize with quiet satisfaction, is the happiest ending I could have asked for. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.